The courtroom was so silent, you could hear the soft tick of the clock high up on the wall. It wasn't silence, it was expectation, heavy and congealed, weighing down all who sat within. Even the air had a weight to it, as if the force of truth itself was going to be thrown like a stone into black, deep water. Christine Brown sat rigidly at the plaintiff's table. Her hands were tightly clasped together so that her knuckles had gone white. She glared rigidly ahead of her, at the judge, her jaw muscle working, her body shaking, not with fear, but with the effort of containing everything. For weeks, for months, she had borne the weight of betrayal, humiliation, and rage. And finally, now the moment she had been waiting for, the moment that the truth could no longer be dug under by Kody's lies, manipulation, and charm. Her attorney, a keen-eyed man with an unshakable assurance, stood up from his seat. He strode across the room with purpose, each step clanging on the shining floor. In his hands, he held a thick bundle of papers, the content of the documents heavy, almost biblical. Christine's breath froze as she observed him walking towards the bench. She knew what was written on those papers. She had envisioned this moment, dreaded it, and yearned for it in equal proportion. "Your Honor," the attorney started, his tone firm and unwavering, resonating through the courtroom with skilled accuracy. "The defense has maintained for weeks that my client is resentful, dramatizing and merely desiring revenge. But today," he raised the papers high for everyone to notice. "Today we present evidence. Evidence that Kody Brown was depositing money into secret accounts, concealed behind the name of his fourth wife, Robyn Brown." The sentences cut through the air as if they were a knife. Gasps broke out immediately. The courtroom, previously stifling with quiet, vibrated with whispers and rushed murmurs. Journalists squirmed in their seats, pens racing across notepads. Relatives in the courtroom leaned forward, exchanging stunned glances, their mouths half-parted in shock. Even bystanders who had attended merely to see the trial shook their heads, muttering, "Did you hear that?" Christine's eyes closed for a fleeting second as she battled the tide of emotion swelling within her. Relief, justice. Yet, the bitter reminder of what had been taken from her. Her chest rushed with fast breaths, the sound of her own pulse drumming in her head. She had prayed for this proof, prayed that the truth would at last break through the night of Kody's deceit. Now here it was, raw, irrefutable, incriminating. Her attorney placed the pile of pages in the bailiff's arms, who bore them to the judge. The judge, a severe-looking woman, with silver hair and eyes that could drill holes through you, pushed her glasses up on her nose as she turned over the initial few pages. Every turn of the paper was louder than the last, every second stretching out forever. Across the room, seated at the defense table, Robyn Brown's face had paled. She appeared as if the earth beneath her could open up at any second. Her lips shook, her eyes wildly flying in Kody's direction. She stretched out, almost reflexively, her hand shaking as she attempted to catch his arm. But Kody, his face clenched with rage, pulled his arm out of her reach. His whole body was tense, his face reddened. Then, in a fit of fury, Kody hammered his hand onto the table. The slap of his palm on the wood echoed through the chamber like a blast. Christine leapt in her seat, her attorney winced, and gasps swept through the gallery once more. "This is rubbish." Kody's voice boomed, his anger and desperation raw in his tone. His words declared themselves like a recrimination, his finger jabbing the air at Christine. "She's lying. She has always been lying. This is all just a pathetic move to ruin me, to ruin this family." The room exploded with whispers once more, this time more urgent, like a wave crashing against the walls of the courtroom. Gasps, disapproving murmurs, and even some snickers at the desperation in Kody's voice came from some. "Order!" the judge cried out, slamming her gavel down on the bench. The abrupt crack rang out through the room, silencing the pandemonium. "There will be order in my courtroom." But the rumors did not subside completely. They diminished, mellowed into murmured discussions, but lingered. The harm was done. The words had already taken root like seeds in every head in attendance. Christine raised her chin a little, her gaze locking with Kody's across the room. For an instant, all else receded. The judge, the jury, the onlookers, even her attorney. There were just the two of them, glaring at one another over the battlefield that had once been a marriage, a family, a life. His glare was laced with rage and denial. But hers was fueled with something more: determination. She didn't have to scream. She didn't have to yell. The truth screamed for her. Her lawyer returned to her side, leaning close and whispering, "We've got him, Christine. He can't run from this." Christine swallowed hard, her throat dry, but nodded. She didn't trust herself to speak. Not yet. She was too afraid that if she opened her mouth, all the pain, all the anger, all the grief of years would come spilling out in an uncontrollable flood. The judge cleared her throat and glared at Kody. "Mr. Brown, let me remind you that we are in a courtroom, not on a stage for a performance. If you can't manage your temper, I will have you escorted out." Kody grumbled to himself, reclining in his chair, his fingers white-knuckled on the tabletop as if he might pull himself over the edge. Robyn stood next to him, tears brimming in her eyes, her face ashen and shocked. She seemed tiny, fragile, a pale imitation of the self-assured woman she usually seemed to be. Christine couldn't help but remember the nights she had lain awake, wondering how Kody and Robyn had rationalized their decisions, how they had sat across the table from her, smiling, telling her nothing was wrong, while all along they had been scheming behind her back. The hurt still smarted, but now the world could see it. The attorney started to present the evidence step by step, page upon page of bank transactions. Dates, figures, signatures, each one was like a nail driven into the lid of the coffin of Kody's case. The public gallery followed with bated breath, leaning so far forward they were almost standing up. With each revelation, Christine experienced a blend of satisfaction and grief. Satisfaction that the truth could no longer be denied. Grief that it had come to this. That the father of her kids, the man she used to love, had preferred greed and deceit over honesty and devotion. Her heart pained her, but her spirit burned more intensely. When the judge had read through the documents, she looked up, face inscrutable. The tension hung in the air once more, this time even thicker than it had been. They all waited for her response, for her statement, for the next installment of this brewing tempest. Christine took a deep breath, her chest expanding. She knew, in the silence, that regardless of what came next, the world had finally witnessed Kody's mask break. The whispers were no longer noise. They were judgment, reverberating off the courtroom walls. The secret was revealed. The truth was no longer concealed. And Christine, shaking but unyielding, sat up straighter in her chair. For the first time in a long time, she was not helpless. The weight of the evidence loomed like a storm cloud that would not budge. The judge's gaze rested on the papers in front of her, her silence more frightening than any words. The courtroom was still heavy with whispers, the kind that bore judgment, speculation, and disbelief. Christine remained motionless, back upright, heart thudding against her ribcage. Every fiber in her body was screaming at her to bawl, to scream, to demand justice at this very moment. But she kept herself in check. The truth had already been revealed. The world had finally witnessed what she had been living with for years, and she was not going to let her dignity falter now. At the defense table, Kody leaned over, his face a picture of desperation and rage. His hands gripped the edge of the table, like he was attempting to anchor himself to something real in a world that had just fallen out from under him. Robyn was seated next to him, her face puffy from crying, her lips shaking. She glanced over at him for reassurance, but he refused her eyes. For once, Kody Brown seemed cornered. His lawyer stood up slowly, tucking in his tie, attempting to bring some calm to the storm. "Your Honor," he started, his voice suave but tense. "What the plaintiff has put forward might look suspicious on the face of it, but I want to stress that financial transfers among family members are not out of the ordinary, particularly in families with complicated arrangements like this one. These funds weren't concealed. They were simply redirected, for the sake of stop." Kody's voice sliced through his lawyer's smooth try at spin. The attorney's mouth froze on the words he was saying, his eyes flicking nervously to his client. But Kody was staring at the judge, not him. His jaw was clenched, his chest shuddering as if each breath was a struggle. I won't sit here and let her spin this. Kody grunted, shaking his finger at Christine. His voice was booming, shaking with rage. She's been lying for years. She's been lying for years. She's jealous. She couldn't cope with the fact that I moved on, that I finally had peace with someone who actually cares about me. He gestured wildly toward Robyn, who wept harder down her cheeks. Christine's attorney jumped up at once. Objection, Your Honor, irrelevant and defamatory. The judge held up a hand, her face stern, sustained. Mr. Brown, you will limit your comments to the financial charges before us. But Kody wasn't done. His feelings were pent up, overflowing like a dam, bursting with years of secrets and pride. She's trying to kill me, he bellowed, slamming his fist on the table. She's trying to make everyone hate me. She never loved the family, never loved me. She just wanted control. And when it went away, she figured she'd bring me down here to embarrass me in front of the world. The courtroom exploded once more, onlookers hunching in close, whispers echoing off the walls. Some shook their heads, others jeered, and others wrote frantically in notebooks. The energy was charged, each word fuel to the fire. The judge pounded her gavel, her voice booming. Order. I warn you, Mr. Brown, once and for all. This is your last opportunity to hold yourself with dignity in this courtroom. Do you comprehend? Kody stood frozen, his face flushed, his chest rising and falling as if he was struggling to contain a fire. At last, he nodded rigidly, but his eyes continued to blaze with defiancy. Christine's attorney leaned forward over her, whispering, "This explosion is doing more for us than anything I've ever said. Let him fall apart." Christine let out a slow breath, her eyes unwavering. She didn't blink when Kody accused her. She didn't have to. The truth was hers. And the jury saw the distinction, her serenity in the face of his turmoil. Then Robyn collapsed. Her initial wails, hushed, escalated into rising shrieks that filled the courtroom. With the aftershock of the judge's admonition, she held a tissue in one shaking hand, her shoulders heaving uncontrollably. "This isn't fair," she wept, her voice cracking. "They're treating us like criminals, when all we ever wanted was to have a family. Whatever we did, it was for us, for the children." Her voice trembled, desperate, frail. She reached for Kody, looking for stability in his being. But his eyes were set forward, pinned on Christine like an animal trapped by its quarry. Christine stood silently, her heart heavy. Robyn's tears no longer hurt her the way they had once before. For all those years, they had been weapons, shields Kody had employed to justify each selfish choice. Now stripped bare by the glare of truth, those tears seemed empty, transparent. The court wasn't believing them, and Christine felt the current shift in her direction. The judge leaned forward, speaking in a calm but authoritative tone. "Mrs. Brown, I know that this case is an emotional one, but I will remind you, this court doesn't base cases on tears. It bases them on facts, and the facts as presented are significant." Robyn slumped back in her chair, holding the tissue to her face, her sobs silenced. Kody shifted restlessly, his rage previously battling the reality of the situation. He knew it. They all knew it. The proof was solid, and no amount of screaming could wash away the thread of numbers typed neatly in black ink on those bank statements. But Kody wasn't a man who gave up easily. He leaned across the table, his voice going low, more controlled now, but thick with venom. "This has nothing to do with money. This is about revenge. Christine couldn't bear that I picked Robyn, that I loved Robyn more than her. This is her revenge for me being foolish enough to be happy." The words hung in the air like poison. Christine's attorney stood up once more, his voice bristling. "Your Honor, as always, the defense is shirking. This case isn't about feelings, isn't about broken marriages, and isn't about friendship. This case is about financial malfeasance, and the documents clearly establish beyond a shadow of doubt that money was hidden in secret accounts." The judge nodded minimally. "The point is noted." She looked towards the jury, who were taking notes, their faces grave, intent. Christine took a deep breath. Kody's tone, his accusations, his drama, they no longer lanced her as they once did. Once those words would have destroyed her. They would have eroded her confidence, made her doubt herself, but not any longer. She had traveled too far, suffered too much, and discovered her strength among the embers of what he had burned down. Now Kody stood small. His commanding voice was desperate now. His smooth defenses sounded hollow now. And Christine knew, with a quiet certainty, that this courtroom was more than just a room of law. It was the stage where the truth had finally caught up with him. The judge once again addressed Christine's lawyer. Proceed. Christine's lawyer smiled weakly, as if he were already aware that victory was near. Thank you, Your Honor. If it is the court's pleasure, I will now call our first expert witness to detail these transfers. Christine sat back, her racing pulse slowing. The storm was still raging, but the fractures in Kody's kingdom had opened wide. His fury, his denial, his frantic efforts to deflect blame, they were not going to save him. They were revealing him. And for the first time in years, Christine felt something strong growing inside her: hope. The air in the courtroom was biting, filled with the electricity of 1,000 unuttered thoughts. The drama of Kody's tantrum still lingered, his voice ringing through the minds of all who stood in the courtroom. But now the stage was changing. This was no longer an issue of rage, no longer an issue of theatrics. This was an issue of facts, hard and unshakable. Christine's attorney smoothed out his suit jacket and strode authoritatively to the room's center. Your Honor, he stated firmly, but evenly, the plaintiff requests that Mr. Daniel Harris, licensed forensic accountant, be placed on the stand. A wave of activity followed as a tall figure in his late 50s stood up from the benches. His gray suit was immaculately pressed. His glasses shone under the fluorescent lighting, and his face held the quiet authority of one who had lived his years in figures. He walked with purpose, each step calculated, as if even his gait bore the hallmark of truth. Christine's eyes tracked him, her heart racing. She had met him weeks before, when her lawyer had introduced them. But now, here in this courtroom, he seemed something more, something like a lifeline, something like a sword honed and ready for war. The bailiff moved forward. Raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God. Guilty as charged, Harris said flatly. He sat down at the witness stand. The room fell silent once more. Everyone looked at him. Christine's attorney stepped up. Mr. Harris, would you mind putting your credentials on the record? Harris pushed his glasses up his nose, his tone level. I am a certified forensic accountant, with 25 plus years of experience. I have expertise in detecting concealed assets, financial deceit, and suspicious transactions. I've testified for both criminal and civil trials, and my findings were utilized in federal probes. The jury nodded slightly, impressed. Even the judge leaned forward a fraction, as if comforted by the seriousness of his knowledge. Christine's attorney walked back and forth slowly. And were you asked to go over financial records regarding Kody Brown and his household accounts? Yes, Harris said. I went over bank statements, tax returns, and internal transfers for the past 7 years. Christine gasped. 7 years. Longer than she had guessed. And what did you discover? Her attorney inquired, his voice slicing through the silence. Harris leaned in slightly toward the microphone. I discovered a series of transfers, large, regular, and carefully hidden. Money was transferred out of joint family accounts and placed into accounts that were solely under the control of Robyn Brown. The transfers started small, but grew rapidly and totaled about $3.6 million over 7 years. The words hit like thunder. Gasps returned to the room. Tasps returned to the room. Pencils scratched madly as writers wrote. Christine's heart pounded. $3.6 million. She had suspected that there was money missing, but to hear the figure out loud, to know exactly how much had been drained away, it was shocking. Her lawyer's tone was cool, measured, almost surgical. Were the transfers made known to everyone in the family, as they ought to have been? No, Harris answered firmly. The account structure and procedure for transferring the money imply an intent to conceal the activity. Indeed, on a number of occasions, memo lines were fabricated to look like normal expenditures when, in fact, they were transfers to the hidden accounts. The gallery murmured more loudly. One juror lifted his eyebrows. Another leaned forward, clearly attentive. Christine's attorney nodded. In your expert opinion, Mr. Harris, were these actions typical of prudent financial management of a household? Harris didn't even hesitate.
No, these actions were typical of conscious fraud and embezzlement. Undefined Christine experienced a shudder run through her chest. She clutched the table edge to support herself. Each phrase was affirmation, each word a hammer striking into Kody's defense coffin. Kody contorted in his chair, his face reddened. He glared over at his lawyer, mouthing something vindictive, but the lawyer held up a hand, telling him to remain quiet. Robyn sat stiff, a crumpled tissue in her hand, her eyes jumping between the expert and the judge. The judge interrupted. Mr. Harris, can you give examples to the court?
Yes,
Said Harris, opening a folder. He removed a piece of paper, holding it up in front of the jury. For instance, on March 14, 2019, there was a transfer of $120,000, transferred from the joint account called Family Expenses, into an account held in Robyn Brown's name alone. The memo line on the transfer stated mortgage payment, yet there is no such mortgage held in this account. On July 22, 2020, $250,000 was taken out in the name of business investments, and likewise routed. Indeed, I discovered a minimum of 38 individual transfers, which are by pattern in the same misleading manner. Every single one was like a slap, hitting harder and harder. Christine could sense the gaze of the jury piercing into Kody and Robyn, waiting for their responses. Her lawyer's tone sharpened. So you're saying under oath that this was not carelessness or mismanagement, this was intentional? Yes, Harris said firmly. The pattern is too consistent to be anything else. The silence that followed was suffocating. Kody's face twisted with barely restrained fury. Robyn covered her mouth with her trembling hand. Christine sat up straighter, her chest pumping, her throat constricting. She felt tears prick at her eyes, but she pushed them away. Not here, not now. She would not let him see her weep. She would not give him that power again. Kody's lawyer finally stood, his voice tightly regulated. Mr. Harris, isn't it a fact that large families tend to juggle money between accounts? That money can be transferred without ill will? Harris looked at him, unblinking. Yes, it can happen. But the records here indicate conscious fraud. These were not transfers described in open reports. These were not made known to all family stakeholders. They were concealed, rebranded, and obscured. That is not standard accounting, it is cover-up. Kody's lawyer shifted restlessly, adjusting his papers. But isn't it also true that objection? Christine's attorney interrupted, his tone terse. Counsel is trying to guess rather than deal with the facts. Sustained, the judge replied. The jury wrote again, their brows furrowing. The courtroom had tipped irrevocably. Numbers shouted louder than any tantrum, louder than any crying. Christine's attorney moved in closer to the witness. Mr. Harris, in your professional opinion, what do these results mean? Harris's words were sharp, absolute. That Mr. Brown and Mrs. Robyn Brown systematically funneled family funds into private accounts for their exclusive benefit, while concealing this activity from Christine Brown and the other wives. It was the coup de grace. The courtroom exploded again, whispers humming like a current artery, heads shaking. Some, glaring openly at Kody and Robyn. The judge slammed her gavel again and again. Order, order in the court. Christine pressed her hand against her chest, her wild heart racing. The truth was no longer hers against his. It existed in black and white. It was revealed by a master who could not be swayed. And for the first time Christine permitted herself the mildest of smiles. She had struggled, she had survived, and now at last she was winning. The courtroom tension had been straining to the breaking point. Following the expert testimony, the walls themselves vibrated with the heavy weight of truth. Kody sat stiff at the defense table, his fists balled, his face a fury mask barely held in check. Robyn sat next to him, blotting at her tear-stained cheeks, her shoulders slumped as though she were shrinking into herself. Christine remained motionless at her table, her tense body loosening only in her eyes, which fixed resolutely ahead. For so long, she'd been made quiet, dismissed, diminished. Today was different, though. Today the attention was hers. Her attorney stood, his voice measured but with an unmistakable note of authority. Your Honor, the plaintiff presents Christine Brown as a witness. All heads turned. The atmosphere changed. The time had arrived. Christine took a deep breath, calming her breath. She stood up from her seat, her heels knocking gently against the floor as she headed towards the witness stand. Her knees were shaking, but she straightened her back, tilting her chin up. She would not show Kody any weakness. Not now. The bailiff took a step forward. Raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God. Christine's voice shook a bit but remained firm. I do. She sat down, smoothing out her skirt with tremulous hands, then putting them in her lap. Her gaze flickered over to the jury. A few of them nodded imperceptibly, as if urging her along. That small expression gave her heart. Her attorney came over softly. Mrs. Brown, can you tell me in your own words how you uncovered these accounting irregularities? Christine's throat constricted, but she spoke. It began small. I would see bills not being paid on time, despite the fact that I knew there was money. I would question, and Kody would wave me off, say I didn't get finances, that I was seeing things. But it continued. Then, I saw a receipt for a transfer. It wasn't made out to the family, it was made out to Robyn, and that's when I knew something was wrong. The jury leaned in, ears perked up. Her attorney nodded. And how did that make you feel? Christine's eyes snapped to Kody, who looked back at her with unflinching intensity. She swallowed. Betrayed. Humiliated. I thought we were a family. I thought everything we worked for, everything we sacrificed was for everyone. But instead, I was being lied to. My children were being lied to. While I was clipping coupons and stressing out about groceries, money was vanishing into accounts I wasn't permitted to open. Her voice trembled, but she regained herself. I invested in this family. I trusted Kody. I believed in him. And she paused, her eyes shining with tears. He betrayed that trust and smashed it. The room was hushed but for the sound of pens scratching. Even the reporters were visibly moved, their faces now not aloof but expressive, their faces filled with the pain in her words. Christine's attorney moved closer. Mrs. Brown, did you ever approve these transfers? Were you ever informed outright where this money was headed? No, Christine responded firmly, shaking her head. Never. I did ask, and each time I was brushed off. I was told I was being dramatic, overreacting, but I wasn't. I knew. Deep inside, I knew. The attorney nodded briefly, then waved. No more questions today, Your Honor. The judge looked around. Mr. Brown, would the defense like to cross-examine? Kody's attorney rose, adjusting his tie nervously. But before he could utter a word, Kody jumped to his feet. I'll do this. The judge's eyes began to narrow. Mr. Brown, you are not your own attorney. Kody's voice rose, defiant. With all due respect, Your Honor, I can defend myself better than anyone. Nobody knows this case better than I do. There was a long pause. The judge let out a sigh, clearly irritated, but eventually nodded. Very well. But you are going to keep your questions pertinent and respectful. One tantrum, and you're finished. Got it? Kody's jaw tightened. Got it? He walked towards the witness stand, his massive figure overpowering. Christine clutched the arms of her chair tightly, standing firm. She could sense the anger emanating from him, biting and claustrophobic. He came to within feet of her, his eyes burning. Christine, he started, his voice full of venom. You tell me you felt betrayed. You tell me you were humiliated. But isn't the reality that you walked out because you couldn't stand that I had chosen Robyn, that I loved her more than you? Gasps spread throughout the room. Christine's heart racing, she made herself take a breath. She stood before him, her voice smooth as honey but ice cold. No, Kody, I left because you no longer loved me, because you no longer saw me, and because you thought you could just give all that we created to someone else and call it a family. That's why I left. The jurors' eyes widened in shock. Even the judge raised an eyebrow. Kody sneered. You're distorting this. You distort everything. I was doing what was best for the family. Christine leaned forward a little, her eyes fixed on his. Then why keep it a secret? Why lie? Why make me feel like I was insane every time I questioned something? If it was best for the family, why did you need to keep it from me? The words struck him like blows. Kody stumbled, his mouth open but nothing emerging. His face went a deeper shade of red. The jury followed intently, their pens held ready but not moving. They weren't writing these days. They were examining him. Shh. Christine's voice grew firmer, more steady. I was silent for years. I was silent all those years when you told me I was hallucinating. But I am not silent now, Kody. And the truth is black and white right in front of them. You can't scream it away. You can't shame me into hiding it any longer. It's here, and everyone sees it now. The silence which followed was deafening. Kody's jaw worked furiously. His fists clenched at his sides. Robyn's sobs finally broke the tension, her face hidden in her hands. At last the judge's voice intervened. Mr. Brown, unless you have pertinent questions, this cross-examination is over. Kody glared at Christine once more, his chest heaving, then stormed back to his table. His lawyer evaded his eyes, obviously frustrated by his client's performance. Christine breathed slowly, her frame shuddering but her soul unbroken. She had stood up to him. She had told her truth. And finally, after decades, she was free. The jury wrote urgently again, the power of her words digging deep.
And Christine knew this fight wasn't done. But the war was shifting in her direction. The courtroom was still vibrating from Christine's testimony. Her words hung in the air, dense and irrefutable, like smoke that would not disperse. Every eye had turned, every head had changed. For years, Kody Brown had constructed himself as the patriarch, the victim, the misinterpreted leader. But here, sworn in and in the harsh glare of fact, that image had shattered irretrievably. The judge leaned forward, his face stern. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he began, his gavel held in his hand, "you have heard the evidence. You have heard the testimony. It is now your responsibility to deliberate." The bailiff escorted the jury out of the room. The heavy doors closed behind them, leaving the remainder of the courtroom in strained silence. Christine sat rigidly still, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She looked down at them, seeing the faint quiver of her fingers. It wasn't fear anymore. It was adrenaline. Relief, a hesitant hope she had forgotten how to feel. Across the room, Kody sat stiff, his red face fueled by rage, his chest moving up and down in short, angry breaths. His attorney leaned over to him and said something, but Kody pushed the words away with a wave of his hand. Robyn clung to him, crying softly, her mascara smeared down her face. He didn't console her. His gaze never faltered from Christine. Minutes dragged on like hours. The fans murmured softly, journalists wrote furiously, and Christine's attorney crossed his arms, relaxed but vigilant. At last, the jury reappeared. The bailiff demanded silence as the forewoman, a middle-aged woman with keen eyes, stood up to read out the verdict. The courtroom fell silent. "In the case of Christine Brown against Kody Brown," she started, her voice firm and strong, "the jury finds for the plaintiff." Christine caught her breath, her heart racing. The foreperson went on. "We determined that Mr. Kody Brown intentionally and knowingly hid marital assets, moving them into accounts bearing the name Robyn Brown. We grant financial retribution to Christine Brown in the sum of $5 million. Gasps echoed in the courtroom. Scribes wrote furiously. Robyn's hands flew to her mouth as she let out a strangled shriek. Christine sat stunned, eyes wide, body shaking. It had happened. She'd won. The judge brought his gavel up. "Order," he stared directly at Kody. "Mr. Brown, this court finds your actions deceitful and damaging. Not only did you violate your legal obligations, but you showed open disregard for the trust of your family. This is a final ruling." The gavel came down with a crack that sounded across the chamber. Kody exploded. He stood up, his shaking finger wagging at Christine. "This is a setup. She poisoned all of you against me. You're destroying my life." His shout echoed off the walls. "I built it all we had. She's nothing without me." The bailiff rushed forward, hand on Kody's shoulder. "Sir, calm down. Don't touch me." Kody bellowed, his face contorted in anger. "This is all lies." Christine stood up slowly, her legs shaking but firming under her. She gazed straight at him, her voice soft but resolute, piercing his tumult. "No, Kody. This is the truth. You created your kingdom on lies. And now it's done." The courtroom was filled with whispers once more. Robyn slumped back into her chair, crying hysterically. Kody fought against the bailiff's grasp for another second, before falling into his seat, fuming with fierce anger. Christine faced the judge. "Thank you, Your Honor." Her voice quivered, but it was full of strength. The judge nodded, then adjourned the court. The slam of the gavel on one final time was like finality. As the courtroom slowly cleared, Christine sat for a moment, her eyes fixed on the wood table in front of her. None of it seemed real. She had fantasized about this. Proof, justice, vindication, for years. And now it was here. She had struggled, and she had triumphed. Her attorney leaned over. "You did it," he whispered. "You really did it." Christine smiled faintly, tears finally slipping down her cheeks. "No," she whispered. "We did it. And now, I'm free." Reporters swarmed near the exit, cameras flashing, voices rising in a chorus of questions. Christine walked past them, her steps steady, her chin high. She didn't answer, she didn't need to. The verdict spoke louder than anything she could say. Outside the courthouse building, the sky was illuminated with hues of gold and red, as the sun set towards the horizon. Christine paused at the steps, closing her eyes and allowing the cool evening air to envelop her. For years she had not felt light, unencumbered, complete. Her phone vibrated in her pocket. She drew it out to find a text from one of her daughters. "Mom, we're so proud of you." Her chest constricted with emotion. She typed a response promptly. "I love you." This was for all of us. Behind her there came Robyn's stifled cries and Kody's furious outbursts as they were taken away from the courthouse steps. But Christine didn't turn around. She had nothing to turn around for. The past no longer held her in chains. She moved ahead into the light of evening, each step a statement of liberty. The kingdom of deceit had crumbled. Truth had emerged victorious. And Christine Brown, years of silence, humiliation, and betrayal later, finally emerged triumphant.